Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Matriarchal Voices from the Matriarchal Times. We have a very special episode today. We have with us two founding members of Total Woman Victory, and I'm going to allow them to tell you more about their organization and what they do. But I'm so glad that they joined us today to spread awareness about their organization through this platform. Hi, Sathi and Isabel.
Hi, Farah. Thank you so much for having us.
So we have six founding members. We actually met through social media, and it was during the Trump inauguration that we had come together. Actually, Sathi sent a message in one of our larger group chats talking about starting a newsletter to gain momentum on the movement for radical feminist liberation. And I mean, all of us, the six members that decided to join Total Woman Victory, create Total Woman Victory, were just amazed first at the responses from contributors and like women who wanted to write about what's going on, and also women who were ecstatic to read about what we had to say. And I think it caused at least someone like me who was fretful for the realm of feminism um, to actually realize that women can and will be fighting back, and we're not going to stand down to anybody, presidents, dictators.
Yes, definitely. Um, I think one aspect of our work that I think was most unexpected was like Isabel had said, the response and just how appreciative women were to have a platform to both create and disseminate contemporary feminist theory. We grew to realize that there was a desperate need for a hub of feminist thought and critique because women were already um, publishing feminist think pieces on different corners of the internet. And once we were able to consolidate it into one media platform, we were able to reach women from around the world and create a space where they can speak unapologetically about the issues that affect women in very material ways. Um, so it's a combination of very like academic critiques of the material conditions of women from around the world, and then also very personal reflections on how the contradictions are experienced by women. Um, and the publication, I think, grew out of both a disillusionment with the organized left in kind of abandoning women and feminism as like either a reactionary or antiquated political framework. Um, because clearly women were desperate to theorize and organize around their social problems. And then also, we think there was a tendency in the feminist movement to kind of abstract different axes of oppression that women experience. We particularly felt this in the infiltration of Zionism in feminist spaces. We have a very specific anti-imperialist focus of the newsletter, and this was intentional because we wanted people, women, to connect their experiences of misogyny and sexism and patriarchy to imperialist accumulation and the plundering of third world nations and the racial caste system and other axes of oppression that compound the experience of the sex contradiction for women. So it's a very specific niche of blending, I guess, specifically the Marxist framework with feminist theory in a way that I think feminism hasn't been able to concretize since like maybe the 70s or 80s. So this is very young women wanting to return to those radical traditions and reignite the most radical of feminism.
It sounds like y'all must have seen more than you expected. I suppose once the contributions started coming in, like I think you would have seen the problem is so much bigger than anyone could imagine. So, so far, what do you think the most significant challenges do you see in feminism and modern feminism?
I think, and I think this is a tool of patriarchy, but just the alienation of women from one another has caused us to, um, isolate our experiences so we're not able to see the oppression and the abuse and the exploitation of women as a class condition that we all experience in compounded ways due to race and class and nation for some women versus others. But I think we've lost that foundational analysis of feminism. And so, because of that, we're not able to, or at least women in the first world, I'm American, so women in the first world aren't able to connect with women in the third world in a material way beyond just seeing the plight of their nation or seeing the plight of their class through the international division of labor. So I think if we return feminism to not just an abstracted framework, but one that is practical, the ways in which feminist groups in the second wave were so notorious for doing, women are able to connect beyond dismissing feminist imperatives, which I think is what happened with the Zionism infiltrating feminist spaces, is that first world women weren't able to connect with Palestinian women because they were missing a materialist framework to understand how sexual violence and honor abuse and cultural violence compounds the experience of genocide and occupation for Palestinian women. So they like reproviding, especially a Marxist framework, I think, that analyzes women's conditions through historical materialism and dialectics, can provide women with the verbiage to be able to articulate how women are connected beyond borders and nations.
And sorry, I'm a little bit sick, but to add on to what you were saying, Sathi, I think that it also connects to the naturalization of patriarchy and like male supremacy and how, women being pit against each other is obviously going to be a side effect of that. But more broadly, how it's almost been like we are told we're crazy for fighting against female subjugation. And the oppression of women has become so normalized that it's been placed secondary to class or race oppression in many like leftist spaces, while in conservative spaces, I mean, all three of those are just completely disregarded. And that's why I think we talk a lot about women being politically homeless, because when we have women that talk about the subjugation of racialized people and of people from outside the like first world, then we're also told that we can't talk about female oppression in certain places or certain countries because of different uh, different structures of misogyny that have been placed for years, and that different political ideologies do not aim to dismantle. Um, and I would say, I mean, we can see through a lot of our contributions that women from the third world are speaking about not only what they experience, but how they're silenced by people who are supposed to be comrades. And I think that's probably the most like heartbreaking thing for me because we see all throughout, like globally, women who try to form collectives are continuously abused. They're called like monsters. They're called slurs. It's just grotesque and it's obvious woman hating.
Yeah. I think the impact that that's had, this like delegation of feminism as divisive or like class reductionist or whatever the claims the left makes about feminist organizing, the impact that that's had on feminists ourselves is that it's kind of divided and conquered. So we have different sects or factions of feminism: liberal feminism, radical feminism, socialist feminism. And because we're so alienated from each other, because of very like, I would say there are profound differences of, analysis, but um, ultimately we're all concerned about the plight of women around the world because of these like minute differences in analysis. We're not able to work with each other. I think this is part of that pitting that patriarchy does to women, but I think like the biggest fault of feminism right now is that our frustration is often taken out on one another. Well, this feminist has the wrong analysis, so I can't work with her at all. I refuse to talk to her. I refuse to, um, you know, engage in polemics with another woman, which I think is so disheartening because we're able to see past political differences with other groups on the left. I'm very critical of religion, but I would never not speak to religious people about politics. I'm critical of gender, but I wouldn't not speak to gender ideologues. I'm critical of, as a feminist, I'm critical of everything because that we have to be in order to, get to the roots of women's subjugation. But we should still be able to talk to each other on the organized left. I don't think it's worth talking to people on the right. They're like too far gone at this point. But progressives should be able to engage in discourse together because otherwise, what is the point of a feminist framework if not to raise the consciousness of the masses of women? What's the point of Marxism if not to, support the working class or the proletariat in the political trajectory of their consciousness? And I think women should be able to have some grace for one another in terms of like where they're at in their political journeys. If we want to be able to build an internationalist revolutionary feminist formation, which I think is the goal, right? If we want to contend with male domination and the roots of women's oppression, then we should be able to have a united front.
It's I just had like a whole long discussion in our community recently, and it kind of went off the rails because of the reason you mentioned that feminists with each other don't see eye to eye. And I completely understand this frustration and struggle that you're talking about. And as at Matriarchy Times, yeah, we also take a radical feminist stance. So I think we will find a lot of similarities in the experiences we're having because of this. So in your sense, like how does radical feminism look to you like in practice? And also, what are the biggest misconceptions that you wish that people would change about radical feminism itself? Because I also agree and feel that maybe radical feminism is the one that's looking for the answers and who will probably find the solution in the end.
I would completely agree. I think I spent like a lot of my life, ever since I was a little girl, I would have called myself a feminist, but I spent a lot of my life trying to figure out where I truly felt in feminism. And like Sathi was talking about liberal feminism or choice feminism, like Marxist feminism. I think that there are all of these different sections that have been made to divide us, but I would 1000% agree that radical feminism is the branch that, at least from my experience, has been most advocating for and pushing for the liberation of women, um, and not just accepting our stance in patriarchy. I feel like the failure for a lot of branches of feminism have been trying to incorporate malehood into feminism and making feminism for everybody. And I appreciate that the framework of radical feminism is contingent on the liberation of the female body and to completely remove this sex class system where women are forced into like domestic servitude, into reproductive slavery, into sexual slavery. And it's honestly just sickening that a lot of different organizations who call themselves feminists will stray away from topics of discussing like prostituted women or um, talking about drug issues and how the drug war affects women, talking about genocide. Um, and it seems like radical feminism is the only branch that has attempted to pull in all of these different variations of oppression and analyze it through uh, like Marxist lens and through anti-racist and anti-imperialist praxis. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Um, for me, I preface my feminism as radical. And I had mentioned this at my speech at Filia, but because the word radical comes from the Latin word radix, which means the root. And I think because of the pervasiveness of male domination, we experience it in the household, we experience it in institutions, we experience it in social relations, and in the way production is organized in society, we experience it in everything. So I think the only way to not only form an analysis of what's going on, but to attack and transform those contradictions is to get to the roots uh, of those of that political economy in and of itself. I think it is um, a way that men accumulate through the bodies of women. So in order to attack, analyze, transform the roots of women's oppression, I think that requires a drastic transformation of social material society, something that reformism, which accepts patriarchy as natural and something that can be mitigated to accommodate women's interests. I don't think that's like a practical program for feminism. Um, and radical feminism, I think, resonated the most with me because it provided like actionable analyses of my day-to-day life that had the most impact on my self-preservation. So I was able to criticize the choices that I made in my day-to-day. Once I stopped shaving because of feminist analysis, or I stopped wearing makeup, or I stopped decentering men, I began to question everything. Why do I live the way that I do? And I was a student of Marxism before I got to reading radical feminist literature, and that just wasn't providing the same critical framework of the day to day. It felt like a very abstracted, when is the revolution going to happen kind of analysis that wasn't helping me understand who I am and what my role is as not only a woman but as a person. And so radical feminism was enlightening. I felt like once I saw misogyny for what it was, I saw it everywhere, and it was life changing. I mean, after reading my first Dworkin book, I was not the same person, um, and it's caused a lot of changes in my life. You meet new people, you outgrow other people, um, you know, you start decentering men in a way that's like drastic, and it kind of alienates you from women in ways that is disheartening and sad. But I've met the most incredible women after being introduced to radical feminism, and I couldn't be more grateful. Like, Marx was enlightening, but Dworkin was life changing. So yeah, like you said, it provides a framework that I think has the potential of changing the day-to-day lives of women.
So, how, like, what was the worst thing that you had to endure in your journey to radical feminism? What is the thing that was most difficult to overcome, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah. Um, so I guess I didn't start my life as a political person. None of us are, right? Like, we're
Yeah.
born as people, and we have to do the work to grasp contradictions. But I'm 22, so when I first became a political person, I think was around 17 or 18. So a fairly young woman, but young girl. But after high school, I got into community organizing work, specifically with the homeless communities in the city that I'm from. And doing that work with a group of progressives who cared, well-intentioned people, I realized I was the only person that noticed that homeless women were experiencing homelessness, poverty, the war on drugs, police violence, male violence, at exponential rates, um, in contrast to their male counterparts. And I seem to be the only person willing to articulate that. Um,
Mm.
it's the most brutal manifestation of male domination on the street. Um, and realizing that I was the only person willing to name that for what it was, like, that was super heartbreaking, because these are well-intentioned people who cared about this community, but they weren't feminists. So they didn't know, they were blissfully naive, they were, whatever the case was, it was heartbreaking regardless to be the one person in the room that was like, the men on the street are abusing women on the street. And so I don't feel comfortable approaching our outreach work through a sex neutral lens. I don't feel good about feeding homeless men the same amount that we're feeding homeless women. I don't feel good about providing them the same resources. I don't feel good about arming men on the street to be as violent as possible to women on the street. And so being the one person to have to name that was, I mean, it was so alienating. Like, I was accused of being reactionary, or like, women are always accused of being complainers, and naming things that aren't actually there, or overthinking and being too emotional and being too whatever the case. But that experience from my quote unquote comrades, or people that are supposed to be in the struggle with me, that was like nothing else. So I think that's when I first got involved in the online radical feminist spaces, and I started to make friends on the internet, because I was like, wow, like, people are not only are they not feminists, but they're anti-feminist. They're invested in being hindrances to feminist organizing. And to this day, I've developed very, very meaningful and like lifelong relationships with women on the street. And in that organizing work, there's still opposition from progressives because it's not inclusive enough, or it's not, it's too focused on women, whatever the case. You know, feminists have dealt with that baseless critique for a long time. And the realizations that I've made from that is that women just need to autonomously organize because we really have no one to do this work but us. So we have to become more pragmatic in terms of starting a feedback loop between theory and practice, and getting out there and reaching women that are in desperate need of access to feminist politics. So yeah, no more relying on the organized left or well-intentioned people, because women have much more potential in learning together and changing the world together than, you know, expecting someone to do it for us because they're coming from a good place, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would just to add on to that, it's like so isolating just being a feminist, like especially a radical feminist. I go to a very liberal university, and I've recently like lost a lot of friends from attending the Filia conference. Um, but I mean, at the end of the day, I still like I met incredible women at Filia, and I have my girls at Total Women Victory. Like, I'm not too worried about the friendships I've lost from uh being, I guess, outed as a radical feminist. And it's crazy to even think of it that way because like you really do get almost outed in a way that is very dangerous. Like women are not allowed to speak up anymore. And I mean, I shouldn't even say anymore. We weren't really allowed to speak up to begin with. But in a time where people love to pretend like that women and men are equal, it's so pervasive almost how men can come into female spaces and say that you're doing this wrong. You're talking about your oppression wrong. You're not allowed to say this about how you're feeling. And we're supposed to accept that. And if you don't accept that, then you're ostracized and you're demonized. Um, and you're basically told you have all of these ideological parameters attached to you that shouldn't be attached to you. Like you can get called a racist for being a feminist. And what's crazy is that these Zionists don't even get called out in the same way that many of us at Total Women Victory have gotten called out, especially by the left, which is why it's so, I keep saying this, that we're politically homeless, but that's really how it is because if you try to talk to women and men on the left, you get called all of these different names. And like Sathi said, I don't really have any interest in speaking to people on the right. I don't think that I need to convince people that I'm a human. Like, I think that if you don't believe women should have rights, I don't even know what to say. But in all, it's just such an alienating experience having to tell people that not only do they not know what they're talking about when they discuss radical feminism, but more broadly, they barely even know what they're talking about when they want to discuss Lenin or Marx or like Engels. I think a lot of people don't even care to take a feminist analysis when reading Marx, when I think it can be almost very obvious to draw connections. I wouldn't say that they outright.
Marx was a feminist. No, just kidding.
No, but that's
He
what
was a
I'm
much better
saying.
feminist than
I wouldn't say that. I
his
mean, they
followers.
didn't outright say I'm a feminist, but when you read Engels and when you read Marx, you can directly,
Parallels.
yes, like
Yeah.
so that's what my big problem is now is a lot of people on the left who identify with Marx and Engels and Lenin and like socialist communist um, ideas, they almost don't know what they're talking about. And I'm worried if that's due to a trend of like TikTok or Instagram or whether they get like a 20-second clip on a summary of a chapter and they think they know what they're talking about. But I think that's been like I keep saying disheartening, but it really is like a lot of this is very disheartening. Like
Yeah.
I'm very worried for the state of the world. But I do think radical feminism, if people actually put in the work and read, and it takes a lot of time. Like I know that it takes a lot, and I've made my own mistakes too. But you have to read and you have to listen and you have to talk to people. And you can't, if you're wrong, you have to not only know that you're wrong, but see how you can fix it and how you can extend your analysis to make sure that you're constantly fact checking and constantly making sure that what you put out is a theory that is not going to be passed around or like I guess BS'd, you know? So yeah.
I just felt on some level the difficulty of your jobs as editors at Total Woman Victory right now, having
Yeah,
to go
definitely.
through
It's constant learning
this.
and unlearning and learning together and reading books together to make sure we're not, incorrectly proofreading a piece. It's a lot of consciousness raising in and of itself. So it's good work. Hard work, but it's good work.
It's happening among like young women too. Like I'm 21, Sathi's 22. The other members of our group, they're like in their early 20s. It's just so crazy to think about. Like we're 20 years old making a newsletter on like radical change.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the only thing that I would say is like motivating to me is that I tend to forget that there are people who are like me out there. And I think with a community like this at Total Women Victory and just like seeing women who engage in radical feminism, I'm like, wow, like maybe it's not over for the world.
Yeah,
Like,
it's very rejuvenating.
right?
Yeah, it's definitely not over. I mean, even we're starting out from our corner and we met in the middle right now. So I think it's also kind of victory for all of us. And now that you mentioned a few times about your Filia experience, would you like to tell us a bit more about it? What you said and maybe how it was to be a part of something like that?
Yeah. Um, for me, it was wow. Like I didn't even have the words for about the first day and a half. I was just speechless. There's something about being amongst thousands of feminists that I've never experienced in my life. I mean, let alone like a handful. So thousands of feminists was it was a life-changing experience for sure. Like to be able to be openly critical of prostitution, of the proliferating pornography industry, of violence against women, um, occupation and genocide. I mean, it was I had never been surrounded by people with such a sound analysis of women's oppression. Um, so, I mean, I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to have gone. Did it have its moments of, um, I wouldn't say failure, but like let down because, women are people too, who make mistakes. But ultimately, I loved being there, and I would love to, um, be surrounded by feminists again. So I came back motivated to organize and to get women in the same room again, and um, to build a radical feminist program that is actionable and on the ground and grassroots. And the organizers of Filia should be incredibly proud of themselves for getting thousands of women in one place, because I'm sure that's no easy feat. But yeah, I mean, we were some of the only young women there, um, which I think was unexpected for me. I was unfamiliar with the British feminist political landscape. So adjusting to that was, I think, a bit of a challenge. I think it's different from the American feminist political landscape. So I didn't want to superimpose like that cultural realm onto the British one. So I went in with an open mind, and there was lots of, culture shocks, or like things I had to reorient myself to. Um, I was definitely let down by the Zionism that was at the conference. The contradictions that unfolded at Filia, I think, in terms of feminists against national oppression and feminists whose interests align with empire and um, the imperial core, I think was um, a necessary unfolding. I think feminism, as in any other social political movement, has to have its waves of discourse in which we're able to find people who are united on the same fronts as us against axes of oppression. And if those contradictions weren't exposed as like explicitly as they were at Filia, then I think we would still be organizing with the wrong people, and would just have to confront these same contradictions much farther down the line, when they're a lot harder to mitigate at that point. So I think, as a young feminist, going was super important, because I could see how the reactionary tendencies of feminism that have kind of sustained themselves over decades, through the work of older feminists, um, kind of grounds younger feminists in a direction that we must take that is explicitly anti-imperialist. So we can find older feminists who have been trying to, um, you know, bridge political analyses like that with women on the right for a while, and have realized that it's not a good, there's no political potency on the right to be able to do that. So they have a new base of feminists, up and coming feminists, that they're able to work with, and we can bridge intergenerational gaps, and revive feminism for what it always has been, which is militant and confrontational and actionable, and has opened absolutely everything up to interrogation. So yeah, it was disheartening, like we said a couple times, but it was good, and it was important that it went the way it did, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think, Isa?
No, I completely agree. I mean, I like, again, I never ever met a radical feminist in my life until Sathi. We met before Filia. She ended up visiting my hometown. And that was already like, whoa, this is crazy. And then I go to a conference where there's like times it 100, times it by 1,000. It's crazy to have realized that we aren't, I mean, we are a minority, but we're not as small as we may seem to be. And I think that was something so important for me to realize, because I'm constantly like uh torn between pessimism and optimism when it comes to feminism. And I think even though Filia had its moments, there was more hope instilled in me than I could ever ask for. So at the end of the day, I think that Filia is a conference that was hosted by people. And like Sathi said, I mean, women are people, people make mistakes, things happen. And I mean, I think that the Filia organizers did an amazing job too. I mean, the being an Iranian woman, I got to go to a conference where there were, I think, like four big Iranian speakers, which was crazy to me. And then there was also a female Iranian like drumming group at the end, which I thought was beautiful as well. And I think that these are so important to see. Um, I think it's just important for girls to at least imagine where they could be in a couple years. And that's exactly what I saw. I mean, I looked at all of the Iranian women that were standing there talking, and I was like, she's like me. She's just like me. And that's an experience I would never want to give up. So, and even when I came home, I mean, I talked to Sathi. I was like, how can I organize for the homeless here? Like, how can I start that myself? I just felt so much more like hope after the conference. And
Mm.
I owe it to all the women that attended Filia. And of course, I made a lot of friends. There was this 16-year-old girl from Palestine, Hebron. Her mom was having one of the stands, and like we still text or DM on Instagram. And it's so cute. Like I don't know. I think that there's so many different aspects of Filia that have trickled into my regular life that I'm forever grateful for.
And I don't know, like, if I will ever see that many feminists in my lifetime being where I am. So it sounds amazing. But even though I don't meet them in real life, I think through our community and through meetings like this, I think at least online I will meet quite a few.
Yes. And you're doing super incredible work connecting women with different political projects around the world, and raising awareness. I was watching a few of the episodes this week to prepare for the interview, and I'm blown away. You're facilitating very incisive and critical conversations that I think um, feminists need to have, but haven't had the platform to do so. So thank you. I'm very humbled to be here.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you because you being here also expands like a lot of topics. You mentioned so many things that I think maybe people have not heard of before because I certainly haven't heard of some of the things you mentioned. And I'm going to wait now till this is over to go and do some research about it.
Me too.
But it's just talking to you just makes me realize like how much people actually don't know. Like when we talk about feminism, people may harp on about certain aspects of it or kind of get caught up in a topic, something related to feminism, and think that that's it. But it's just never just one thing. It's so many things, and it's so many, like you mentioned, the situation of homeless people. And recently I was seeing something about how still medicine is not invested in researching the effects of medicine on women, where they do their control studies and testing mostly on male specimens, lab rats, because of hormonal behavior of female rats. They're excluding them from studies. So even basic human rights like medical care is still being denied to us on a large scale, and nobody is talking about it. So
Right.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
you
think,
yeah.
sorry, I was just
Oh,
gonna say it's
yeah.
very deliberate. The reason why people don't talk about it is because, look, I'm gonna get into some conspiracy stuff, but I really think that um, to have a global revolution, there needs to be a revolution among women. And all of the great thinkers have said this before. I mean, Lenin said that there can be no liberation of any oppressed class without the liberation of women. Um, so I think that it's very deliberate, the fact that they hide female oppression, both in healthcare, even in homelessness, and food insecurity and armed conflict. Because if there is ever the liberation of women, that will kickstart the class liberation, racialized liberation, anti-imperialism, and that's exactly what the imperial core does not want. So I think it's so easy to keep oppression confined when you keep women oppressed. So
Mm.
I definitely believe that this like medical misogyny not only is deliberate in its practice, but it's deliberate when it's being hidden, because if it's solved, there's who knows what will happen to the male supremacists, male supremacy, sorry.
Mm.
Yeah. And just to
And
extend that analysis, the political implications of the failures of the medical institutions to research female ailments and reproductive disorders and um, you know, other female specific um, medical problems is that if women can't get adequate health care, um, then they remain dependent. We remain dependent on, uh, you know, the institutional family, and it reproduces patriarchy generation after generation. If women can actually, move beyond our struggles with PCOS or endometriosis or gender neutral body problems, cancers, and other things, if they're better researched on the female body, then maybe we'd have the tools necessary to go beyond our confinements to the household. Um, so it keeps us dependent. So like Isabel said, everything has some kind of sinister motivation beyond just hormonal cycles of mice are annoying to have to do. I think a lot of it's deliberate.
yeah, I think that was kind of the main focus of your speech as well, right? How misogyny is resurging in our culture and in the political landscape. You had mentioned that you can see the patriarchy reorganizing itself. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that, please?
Yeah, definitely. So a dialectical analysis of contradictions. I'm going to break this down for everyone. It means that two opposing forces in a social problem. So in patriarchy, the opposing forces would be male power over women, male control over women, and women's resistance. They cannot exist without one another. So men don't have the power to freely exploit and abuse and enslave women without creating the potential of women fighting back. They're foreseeing this potential, so they need to adapt. They need to create some kind of, whether it's through the law, whether it's through institutions, whether it's through culture, whether it's through social relations, they need to maintain control over women. So throughout history, as that transformation of that contradiction happens through struggle, like I said in my speech, women gaining the right to vote in America in the 1920s meant that we now had civic power, which means that men had to control women in different ways. They institutionalized laws that restricted that political power of women. Women weren't allowed to own their own property. Women weren't allowed to pass on their wealth. Women weren't allowed to open credit. Different things like that to maintain control over women, despite the fact that now we have political say through the vote. After men were deployed in World War II, women had entered the workforce in large numbers. Um, and social production gave us access to economic and social independence. Now that we were working, we could have our own households. We didn't need to be dependent on men. But then men came back. They realized that women were very independent now. And so they repopularized the ideal housewife. It was now cool again to be in the home and cooking and having 10 kids and taking care of entire communities. That was the sociocultural ideal once men came back from war. And that was so women who remained independent were socially ostracized. They were seen as perverse or this was also at the same time that pornography kind of took off. It's when Playboy magazine debuted, so women that remained independent were seen as sexually perverse and sexual deviant. So to be in the household was cool again. So they were able to re-domesticate women. In the 70s, the prostitution industry globally took off because of U.S. militarism throughout Vietnam and Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. So as women make advances, as women struggle to organize, to progress women's rights, patriarchy doesn't just reemerge, but it evolves in response to feminist gains. When one form of male power becomes untenable, men reorganize their domination through new institutions. So it doesn't just return to the old social order. It looks like the growing number of pornography platforms instead of tenable brothels in different cities. It looks like choice rhetoric instead of the old modesty laws. Now it's cool to sell sex. Now it's actually empowering to wear makeup. It's actually, instead of reverting to the old control over female virginity, now it's cool to be sexually available to men. Surrogacy markets instead of forced marriage. So there's still a reserve force of women that are freely exploitable. And it's sad. And it's sad because as we make gains, we have to be prepared for men to respond. So mm-hmm. I think that's been kind of the missing piece with feminist organizing, is that as we win, we kind of like settle in the win, and then we become unprepared for the adaptation of patriarchy, which is quick. We don't see it coming often, but men are prepared. So we must be prepared.
It's easier to stay on the top than to get there, I suppose.
Yeah.
I
remain vigilant.
Yeah. I was just thinking about when you mentioned that they're using tactics to kind of disarm feminists, and then the male loneliness epidemic suddenly popped into my head, and it was
see as women stop choosing marriage, now suddenly they're heartbroken and sad, and they have tactics, and it seems like it's spontaneous and out of nowhere, but they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. Our enemies aren't just dumb, they're strategic.
It's the dumb ones that we have to be scared of, actually, because they're reckless and they don't care what they do. They don't care about the repercussions of what they do.
Right. They're willing to run over anyone in their way. So,
yeah. So now you and our community, Total Woman Weekly and Matriarchy Times, we basically have the same kind of modus operandi, so to speak. We are radical media. So how do you see us promoting the next wave of feminism as radical feminist media?
Um, I think, I mean, our on our end, we have our like resident artist, Winnie, and I think that in terms of, I guess, spreading the radical thought and creating a mass consciousness is going to partially be through art. And I think that her role as an artist is so important because, I mean, I'm so horrible at art. I cannot draw at all. But I wish I had the poster. I can show you our Total Woman Victory poster, actually. Um, I just think that it's so, I mean, it seems small, but it's something that's so important to women to just be able to see pictures like these, for women to see a woman like this and say, I see her, I am her, and I'll take initiative in the same way that she does. And I think that this art is going to be vital to provoking women into rising up and taking back our sanity
Mm.
because it's been too long that we have been pushed to the side. And I mean, the more that science also proves that women are not subordinate, and the more that women start to socialize and start to say, we're not going to keep letting men put us down. If we have these like pictures of a radical initiative, I think that that is what will really inspire, especially young women who, I don't know, I think that there's unfortunately this sort of like ongoing wave of, I would say it's generational as well. Like men and women are not necessarily like reading. And I'm not saying that like pictures should take up the books that they should be reading, but I think that it's definitely a good start to get someone who might not be interested in reading like a 500-page book to maybe get to like an 80-page newsletter like ours. So I think that that's one of the first steps is trying to appease to our audience and getting younger women into the initiative, um, because I think I mean, as we talked about at Filia, it was mostly older women, and I think older women have been doing the work, and now it's almost like it's our time, our turn.
Yeah. Um, the work that Total Woman Victory does um, serves as a complement to the work that Matriarchy Times is doing in terms of disseminating feminist thought and contemporary feminist theory through different mediums. So, like Isabel said, art. I think it's super important that um, Farah, that you're doing podcasts because it's important to hear from feminists and to hear how different women articulate different political thought. Total Woman Victory takes the form of print, so women are able to read feminist material. Your social media content is so important. I was just scrolling through Matriarchy Times and I was like, wow, there's so many different mediums in terms of reaching young women and older women. Um, so I think we're both our organizations are doing the critical work of reaching women from around the world and equipping women with radical feminist theory in different tangible ways through hearing, through reading, through looking, through um, resonating with art and poetry and other creative mediums. So I think the best way for us to collaborate would be to support each other's work. I'm definitely excited to tell our readers about Matriarchy Times and to engage with all the beautiful content that you've all created in your team. And to build feminist coalitions with other feminist organizations or radical feminist media that is doing similar work so women have options. I think that's kind of the specific niche that's been missing from feminist organizing. The left has, or the organized left has a lot of options for engaging with different political thought. And feminism has kind of been concentrated to a few different options. We have thousands of books from the 70s and 80s, but like Issa said, I don't know if reading is hard, but people aren't reading as much anymore. So giving young feminists different options is super important. So different coalitions of people doing this work and supporting each other's work to reach all different corners of women is super important, and I think would connect women in a way that's tangible to actually create a mass or global feminist network.
Reading isn't hard. I think it's the dopamine hijack that's going on. So nobody can actually read anymore.
Yeah. They can't sit for a few hours and do it.
Not even for a few hours. Like if you go to classrooms, like children in lower school, middle school, high school, even in my own college classrooms now, people can't sit still for 90 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
I'm genuinely worried for the younger generation because I see in my classes everyone's pulled up ChatGPT. The girlies are shopping. Like the people are Snapchatting. Like, what are you guys doing? And that's what they do in every single classroom. Like, not only are children not learning at home, but they're not learning at school. Like, and I think that I would say this is a failure on the system. I think that as technology has advanced, the system has also needed to advance to match with the kids, but that's not what's been happening. And unfortunately, technology and these different social media platforms have taken over and have almost in place taken the place of teachers, taken the place of books, taken the place of even podcasts. Like, it's very worrying that children are getting hooked on 20-second clips and just scrolling, 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 scrolling. Like, you can't do anything with your life if you're dependent on being constantly given this dopamine rush every 20 seconds. It's unrealistic. And that's not what our bodies were made for. Our bodies weren't made to be scrolling and watching TikToks all day. But that's what people do now.
Unfortunately, it's what's happening everywhere, and that's something that is everybody's problem, and nobody wants to admit it right now because it's working for the organizations for their marketing strategies and everything. It's working for them, so nobody's going to solve this anytime soon. It's also really funny when you mentioned that you want to tell your readers about matriarchy times because at that moment I was listening to you and the only thing that was going through my head was I have to tell everyone in our community to go and read your articles.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
I was like just feeling like everything you're saying, I need everyone to hear it. And I want everyone to read all the articles that you all have meticulously kind of edited and put so much work into. And I feel that you all will be able to express the feminism that we are reaching for in a way that will reach them because we
Yeah.
still, apart from our social media and our articles and stuff, we have our live community in Discord. So we do have the occasional dispute, and we get members who come in not really knowing what kind of feminism we are upholding there, and then the fights break out. And so
Yeah.
I think reading yours publication would be a good place to start
Yeah.
for some of them. Yeah.
Discord 101. Yeah. I think what's unique about our work is that it feels almost like a radical feminism how-to manual or like a
Yeah.
basics or intro to radical feminism, which is good for both people unfamiliar with radical feminism, but also people who've been doing this work for a long time and kind of need that regrounding of the theoretical framework. So it reaches different people in a lot of different ways. But yeah, I'm excited to collaborate because there's still so much work to do and so many people to reach. But through our different mediums, I think we're on the right track.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely hope that we can work together again in the future. And just one more thing, the name. How did you all come up with the name? Is there a story behind it, or was it just
Take it away.
yours goal?
It was from originally our group chat on Twitter was named Total Woman Victory. I believe we got the name from some like YouTube video that our friend was another editor, one of the other editors had um thought was like funny. And in the video, there was a clip where it says like Total Woman Victory. And I think we just made it into a meme. And that day, after Donald Trump's inauguration, that day that Sathi texted, asking the group chat if anyone wanted to create a newsletter, we were discussing names and we were like, I mean, Total Women Victory is perfect.
Yeah.
It really like the honest truth is that it started as a joke, as a meme, and now we're like serious women.
Yeah. I think it's also just like a common phrase that different particularly militant formations like fighting national oppression or the interests of capital have done. So like total Cuban victory from Mr. Castro or total Vietnamese victory from Ho Chi. So a lot of like revolutionaries that we look up to who fought the good fight um, have said like, you know, total army victory of their different groups. So it's a little bit of a play on a lot of different things, but um, hopefully the feminist goal is total woman victory. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything.
Okay, so I'm hoping that the manifestation will happen if enough people keep saying total woman victory over and over again.
Right.
Maybe we can get it.
Turn it
Into
into a
fruition.
spell,
Yeah,
right?
like a mantra.
In the mirror, like 10 times a day. Total woman victory, total woman victory.
Yeah.
It'll happen. It'll definitely. If not in my lifetime, I just hope women start bearing arms soon.
Yeah, it's sad to think that it might not be our lifetime, but hopefully we can make enough of a change that it will keep going instead of breaking off somewhere in the middle.
Right. Keep
Mhm.
harnessing that tension to get us closer and
Mm.
closer. I'm determined to make it in my lifetime. So good
I
luck,
think
world, while I'm still around.
Yes.
almost inevitable. I mean, it's inevitable with Sati around. If Sati's here, we're getting freed. But
No, just kidding. But
I mean, Marx
yeah,
himself talks about how the proletariat revolution is inevitable, and I would say the same is going to happen for women. I mean, you can't keep a class oppressed forever. We'll always be fighting back, and we'll always be revolutionizing. And if I can be honest, like I think total woman victory is just the beginning. And I'm so excited to see where we end up just maybe 5 to 10 years. Like,
right. Agree.
Okay, so I think we can wrap up for today. Maybe we can have another conversation sometime in future. And is there anything that you'd like to share as a kind of closing statement? Anything you want to tell the audience before we wind up for now?
uh, I'd like to
Um,
thank Sarah. Thank you for having us. Thank you to Matriarchy Times. We are looking forward to working together again. I mean, again, it's just so incredible to speak with a radical feminist, to speak to and know that there are radical feminists watching this, listening to this, and maybe even thinking like, hey, I agree with these women. I want to be part of the revolution. Um, I mean, I would love for everybody to get into the movement to raise their consciousness.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. I want to thank Farah and the team at the Matriarchy Times for having us on. Um, if any listeners want to engage with our work, our individual essays are available to read on our Substack, Total Woman Victory, um, and the full PDFs of our issues are available for free on our website, totalwomanvictory.com. We're a quarterly newsletter, so January, April, July, and October are our release dates, and we um, organize the construction of each issue in between. And we take contributions from all over the world. If you have art, if you have an essay, if you have a hybrid media, poetry, uh, a collage, a painting, we would love to publish it. So connect with us. This is just the beginning. We just completed our first full issue or our first full volume, which was 4 issues. So we're on to our second year. We're fairly young, but we're super excited to connect and publish the work of women from around the world. So please get in touch. We're super reachable, accessible. It's a group of young women running all the social media. So you'll probably end up in a conversation with Issa or I or one of the other incredible young women. And we're still learning, so we're excited to learn with the women of the world.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you so much. And it was really, really great talking to you. And I think that um we can make a difference. I have a feeling because at the end of the day we are all rooting for a matriarchy. And I just, if you don't mind, sorry, I just want to know, like, in your vision, what is the matriarchy going to be like?
I mean, what do you think, Sati? I think, okay.
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 No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I consider myself also an eco-feminist. So I think the discussion of matriarchy, I try to look at it anthropologically. I mean, one of my pet peeves is when people talk about matrilineage and matrilocalism, matrifocalism, comparing it to the broader term of matriarchy. And I also think people have a misconception of matriarchy. Maybe not the listeners here, but I would say a lot of the women I've interacted with view matriarchy as the inverse of patriarchy, where it's like female domination and male subordination. And I mean, if you look, there has never been a society that has been like that because when women have the power, we never oppress men. There has never been a time where if there was like a female head, that the males in her clan were oppressed or subjugated to oppression. Um, so when I think of matriarchy, I think of the more terms like matrilineage, matrilocalism, I think of indigenous culture a lot of the time, which although it shouldn't be confused that every single indigenous culture was matriarchal or matrilineal, whatever. But I think it's also very important to for Western accountability of how many matrilineal tribes were harmed due to imperialism and due to Western expansion. Um, if I were to think about matriarchy at all, it would be more of a calling to anti-imperialism and anti-patriarchy, anti-male supremacy, with a focus on female sovereignty. Um, Although I think it's really difficult to a think of a culture or country to be matriarchal. Um, I would honestly love to see the existence of one. And maybe I would even love to see the existence of the inverse of patriarchy, to see what life would be like if there was female domination. Um, is that crazy to say? Maybe. I mean, we live in a world with male domination, so can't a girl dream?
Yeah. I was gonna say my answer is a lot less woke, but like yeah, a female dominated society would be absolutely sick. I think the lesbian separatists were onto something. I would love to have like a women's only island somewhere warm, only women and children allowed, and social production is key. So we're not just lounging, but we're working, we're chopping wood, and we're building houses, and we have our own political economy, and we have, you know, a vote in the international realm of politics. I think if we have even one nation, one female nation, then we can continue building from there. But I think that would be a really cool place to start, to have, you know, a sovereign seat at the table, I guess, if that's a corny way to put it. But some sort of self-determined political body would represent, you know, a quote unquote matriarchy, that allows us to, you know, materially contend with the machinery of imperialism. Because I think all oppressed classes and people have to begin, by self-organizing their own political bodies. So if we have even one female nation, I think we can work with this world and the conditions that we've been left to deal with it in.
I don't know about a nation, but I might have some good news for you all on that front. We have actual matriarchal villages being constructed in places in the US. Um,
Oh, can I
yeah,
visit? I have to go. That's so
Right.
cool.
I
Where is
think they're
this?
still being developed, but they're definitely gonna happen. So it's becoming true. Like
It's
it's
yeah.
happening. Yeah.
Wow. That's
They'll be.
awesome. I'm definitely there. I would love to connect with them.
Mm.
I'll try and get you some details about it. Um, Off the top of my head, I really can't tell you where or when it's happening, but I could
Yeah.
probably find out and let you know. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thanks again. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you again. And also to all our listeners, thank you for listening to this episode. I hope that you learned at least as much as I did, or maybe even more. And yeah, thanks, Sati. Thanks, Isabel, so much. You were really great to talk to, and I'm so glad to have met you.
Thank you so much, Farah. This was awesome.